Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here, bringing you my reaction and review of the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery, People of Earth, Season 3, Episode 3. As usual, the first part of this review will be spoiler-free, but I'll get into spoilers in the second part. I'll give you a warning before I do so, however. So at the end of last week's episode, we see Burnham and Discovery finally reunited, and this episode continues their journey together. I have to say that overall I generally really enjoyed this episode. It had a lot of the elements of Star Trek that I really enjoy, including the requisite messaging that we've come to expect from the franchise. There's some really great performances by the actors as well, and the ending is one that feels very familiar for Star Trek, but with an interesting Discovery 32nd century twist that I will certainly get into on the other side of the spoiler warning. But yeah, suffice it to say, an excellent episode, great performances by people, some really nice twists that you may or may not see coming, but definitely one that highlights the changes in some of the characters, most especially, of course, Michael Burnham, that have occurred over the past year, and how those changes affect them and their interaction with the Discovery crew, I think is really interesting. The episode also introduces us to some new characters and some new situations, and kind of reinterprets what we expect the 32nd century world to look like. So expect some insights into what's going on with regards to the Federation and Earth and the burn and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, top marks for this episode. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. Okay, here we go. I'm going to get into spoilers now, so if you haven't watched the episode, you may want to stop here, but if you don't care about spoilers, by all means, keep watching. So as I said, at the end of last episode, we get the reunion of Burnham and Discovery, and at the start of this episode, we kind of get a bit of a slice of what's been happening to her in the meantime, and we see that over the course of this year, Burnham has changed quite a bit, not just in her outward appearance, but in how she has adapted to this new century and how the relationship that she has with Book, which is one of deep, abiding friendship. I thought that was a really interesting choice. I'm glad that they don't plunge these two directly into a romantic relationship and instead show the development of that friendship. I think that was an interesting choice by the writers. However, over the course of this year, she has distanced herself from the possibility of ever seeing her fellow Discovery crew members again. She has let them go in a sense, and the Burnham that we meet here is very different from the one that we left at the end of That Hope Is You Part 1. This makes for some great character scenes, notably between Burnham and Tilly. There's also a great Burnham-Georgiou scene, which I was really pleased to see. Georgiou has this way of just kind of speaking her mind and being very blunt and kind of cutting to the core of what some of the issues are, including, you know, Michael having not been a part of Starfleet, having a bit more of a free reign over her life and a little bit more of a loose canon, and without having to adhere to Starfleet rules and regulations. That, of course, has colored her experience as well. Most interestingly is the interaction, though, between Burnham and Suru. There was, of course, some question at the end of Season 1 as to who would be the captain, Suru or Burnham, and Suru said that will be a discussion saved for a later time. We don't really get that discussion in this episode because Burnham immediately says that it's Suru. Suru should be the captain, and she cedes the control of Discovery to him. Eventually, by the end of the episode, she will become his first officer. So, yeah, an interesting dynamic here. I'm really glad that Suru is made to be the permanent captain. There was some question brought up as to how exactly he was promoted to captain, given that there's nobody of higher rank to promote him, barring, of course, Philippa Georgiou dressing herself up in an admiral's uniform, which is a whole other subject entirely. But, you know, there's always precedent in Star Trek before, and I remembered the Voyager episode Before and After, which showed us a possible future in which Chakotay was captain of Voyager, and he did have 4 pips on his collar. So it looks like there is some sort of Starfleet regulation that possibly allows for a field promotion to captain, even when there's not someone of a higher rank present. As the title of the episode implies, we of course get a look at Earth in this time period, and it's very different from the Earth left behind by the crew of Discovery. It turns out that Earth is no longer a part of the Federation, and Starfleet headquarters and the Federation have left sometime within the last century. So it's a very different environment that we find. Ever since I was a kid watching Star Trek, I always kind of wondered what it would be like to see a Federation where Earth wasn't, the capital and the main kind of central planet, but instead was kind of more on the periphery. And we definitely get that in this episode with, some characters directly calling it out. Burnham telling Book that, he could start a new life out here where no one knows him, out this far out. Which is interesting. Earth is kind of now the frontier, and I think that's an interesting idea, having Earth sidelined a bit and not just be the center of attention all the time. Will that change over the course of the season? Probably, but for the moment, I'm enjoying the possibility of them exploring that a bit. We get introduced to a new character in this episode, Adira, played by Blue Del Barrio, a character that has gotten a lot of press prior to the airing of Discovery. Definitely an interesting addition to the cast. I love what they bring to the show. The fact that they're 16 years old, I wasn't expecting this character to be that young, so that's definitely an interesting choice. I love the kind of scientific, wide-eyed enthusiasm that they bring, and seeing Adira geek out with Stamets over the spore drive was a lot of fun. However, Adira does kind of bump up against Tilly a bit in this episode, and Tilly seems a bit threatened by this character, and I love that she has this kind of reaction to her where, I don't know, maybe threatened isn't the right word, but there's definitely a feeling of, everybody's smart here. You don't have to show off. Like there's a little bit of, not jealousy, but just a little bit of feeling of maybe being usurped at some point that I really enjoyed. I thought that was really played well. And, Tilly, who's not that far out of her teens herself, sees this kind of young upstart, and I think, like I said, feels a little threatened there. That was fun to play with. The central conflict of the episode comes when the Discovery journeys to Earth to find them a little bit more closed off, a little more xenophobic and scared of outsiders, and they find themselves in the middle of a conflict between the people of Earth and this warlord, I guess, seemingly at the time named Wen, who raids them for dilithium and that sort of thing. Now, Wen, who wears a mask to kind of obfuscate his face, is unmasked and revealed to be human from Titan, an Earth colony, obviously, within our solar system on the moon Titan. And this is, of course, an interesting surprise revelation, one that I might have seen coming a little bit, but still it was really interesting to see that play out, with the realization that Earth is kind of being the xenophobic planet of the week in this case. A lot of people have pointed out that this is kind of a common Star Trek story, but instead of the planet of the week being the weird xenophobic aliens who are in conflict with neighbors, it turns out that Earth is that, and the ending is so Star Trekian in its construction, where Suru and Burnham bring the two sides together to discuss their differences and come out to a negotiated settlement rather than fighting it out. I loved that. So we eventually find out that Adira is not all that they seem to be. They're host to a Trill symbiont, a symbiont who is also part of Admiral Tal, who was the transmission that led Discovery to Earth in the first place. So I think this is an interesting story. I love that Adira is a human but plays host to a Trill symbiont. We of course saw this before in the first episode to feature the Trill, the host, where a Trill symbiont named Odan was joined to Commander Riker. So yeah, this is not something that we haven't seen before. I do have to say kudos to the Discovery writers for making it so that Suru and Burnham were unaware that the Trill were a joined species. The Trill, of course, are known at this time, or in the 23rd century, but they keep secret the fact that they're a joined species up through into the 24th century. So nice catch by the writers there. Kudos to them. There is a possible slip up with regards to when synthahol becomes a thing, but there's a couple explanations that could make that work as well if you're wanting to play a little bit of mental gymnastics. But yeah, overall, I really love the attention to detail that the writers are paying to all the small things in Star Trek. The closing of the episode, of course, with the crew beaming down to the former site of Starfleet Academy and that kind of reunion with Earth and a familiar location was very touching. I thought that was great. And of course, the strains of Alexander Courage's original Star Trek theme playing under it. Yeah, this is great stuff, tugging at all the heartstrings. Interesting to see where it goes from here as they seek out the Federation and what is left of Starfleet. Hopefully we get some more answers in next week's episode, Forget Me Not. So yeah, I want to hear from all of you. What did you think of this episode? Did you enjoy it as much as I did, or did you have issues with it that I didn't bring up? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much to the Patreon supporters for your help in bringing these episodes to you. A couple new supporters this month. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Every little bit helps out the channel. Thank you to everyone else for liking, sharing, and subscribing. And of course, for just watching the videos. That is the biggest help you could give the channel. I'll see you all in the next episode. Until then, as always, cake is eternal.